going over the entire surface. I'm going to do it several times until what I have achieved is a white looking opaque surface. This is a piece of 1200 grit sandpaper, which is very fine. That's something that on a car you might do in the last step before you paint it. This is 220, much coarser. Water, pour a little water on there. That's the beauty of wet dry sandpaper. The sandpaper doesn't fill up, so you can give it a light sanding with this, and it will get rid of the marks that were made by the electric sander. I don't do with this yet, but I will show you some of my finished pieces. Some of the abstract ones are just that, they're very abstract. In that case, I might apply the paint, the color of the paint directly to the sanded surface, whereas in a figurative painting, I would coat it with gesso first, just like you would an ordinary canvas. Plastic tarp here. You want a non-porous surface, because when you apply this resin to the surface, some of it's going to bleed off the edges, and that's how I also get those little inconsistencies around the edge that I usually like. I'm getting ready to apply this fiberglass resin to the piece over here. So here's a gallon of resin. These are the tubes of hardener. I'm going to mix it in this little thing. I've got rubber gloves on and piece. I'm going to press these pieces of saran wrap, and I've got it. It's good to have them prepared in advance because they stick together and they're really hard to deal with, and you have to do everything in a rather timely fashion. So the first thing I'm going to do here is pour an amount of the resin into this container that I think will do the job. This resin is kind of old, by the way, and the older it gets, the more opaque it becomes, and so you don't want to use old resin on to cover imagery that you've made. It's always going to yellow it somewhat, but you don't want to yellow it too much. The amount of hardener you put in there, it's rather imprecise, but you need quite a bit if you're going to spread it out over a long distance. So I've got these 3 tubes that are already opened. That was about 1/3 of a container, and another 1/3. I would say that probably ought to be enough, but I'm going to put just a little more in there. Now, you have to work fast, so I'm going to stir this up. Okay, I use these throwaway brushes. I'm going to pour this on here, hold it out, and start spreading it around as quickly as possible. You know, I probably over catalyzed, that's the hardener, and so it's going to start setting up pretty quickly. And you don't want to get any on your clothes or on your skin. If you do, what I've found takes it off is either lacquer thinner or acetone, which that stuff isn't good for your skin either, so I try to avoid getting it on me if I can. This stuff is a pain in the butt to work with because it, as I said, it sticks to itself, and you know, you want to get it for this thing that I'm doing. I want to get it to cover really well. So there's one sheet. Sheet number 2. Sheet number 3. In fact, in some of the figurative ones I've done, I've gessoed the entire front side, did the painting, and then taken a sander and sanded away the paint and the gesso to reveal this in the back. This one's probably going to be translucent all the way through. I left after putting this plastic on. I went for a bike ride, was gone for about an hour and a half. So I came back and I've taken the plastic off, and now this is the result of that surface on the back side. Here's what it looks like on the front. It's still somewhat tacky to the touch. The next thing I'm going to do is spray paint over it, and that will also help it, not stay tacky. It'll eventually harden anyway, but because it had that plastic on it, that's kept it somewhat from hardening up. In order to enhance the three-dimensional qualities, I'm going to hit it with a light spray and a dark spray. In this case, I'm using white spray paint, and I'm going to spray it all in one direction first with the light. And you can probably see that, it's hitting the raised surfaces on one side. I turned the whole piece around, so I'm spraying in one direction from the other side with black spray paint. And as long as it's light and dark, you can use any colors you want. If you wanted to use gold for the light and black for the dark, light blue, dark blue, whatever, you're going to get that result. One time I sprayed black and white, and it turned out gold. I don't know why, but it's absolutely beautiful. Okay, so you can see I've turned it over. Now here's the image from the front side looking through the sanded surface. But just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like at the end, I'll pour some water on it. That is what it will look like when the clear coat hits it. And remember, this is just the background from underneath. And this will work fine. This is a piece of the plexiglass scrap that I've got left over. I'm going to cut it into several pieces here. This bandsaw works fine for this, cutting the stuff. It doesn't break it or anything. It's got a plastic covering on it you want to take off. So let's do that. Now, this piece here, combined with this piece, this is going to be my hanger. And as I say, this is for a smaller piece than the one we're working on. I'll show you a different method in a minute for that one. So I've got these two pieces. I'm going to sand them down so they fit together. But on one of the pieces, I'm going to set my bandsaw so that I can cut a groove in it, which the wire is going to go in. So let's do that. And I've also spared you a lot of sanding, but if you can see here, there's a groove that I've cut on the bandsaw. This wire will fit inside the groove, so I'm going to pour a bunch of a puddle of the polyester resin right there, drop that down in it, wearing gloves of course, put the wire in it, pour more resin on top of the wire, and I've sanded these surfaces so they're good and acceptable to the adherent stuff, and I'm going to set that on top of it. And also, because that is going to make the piece stand up basically about a ½ inch from the wall, I'm going to need to put something on each corner. So I've made 2 more of these. I'll also sand these, and they set down in each corner. That allows the entire thing to stand away from the wall. Now, in a second, I'm going to show you another method for doing a big piece like this, because this is still too flexible. This might actually work if I were to hang it vertically, but if it's going to be a horizontal piece, you need more wire than that, and more than just one anchor point, because you'd never get it to hang straight, for one thing. In part 3 of this video, I'm going to show you the actual painting on the front side. So a lot of this has been about preparation and foundation. Since this painting, like the one that I've been working on, is a long rectangle and needs to be hung from several anchor points, I've glued on, I made a wooden frame which I just glued on. If you look at the attachment method, you can see the pools of this resin. They had to be deep enough to cover all of this surface. But at any rate, it's just a wooden frame with screw eyes in both ends like you would hang on an ordinary painting. And the frame itself keeps it standing off the wall at a distance of 3/4 of an inch, which is what the wood frame is here. So if you saw any of my previous video, part 1 of this, you saw some of the finished paintings. So this is a longitudinal finished painting, and you get an idea of what you're after here, and you can see here's that background that we've been putting on. In this particular painting, as in most of them, I have to deal with all kinds of mistakes, like when I'm sanding the surface up here, I sanded all the way through, and I had to reapply resin to the surface and then fill those holes. But in the end, it's an abstract area that I could deal with. And you might also notice that there are like these vertical pieces here of the white, and here's another vertical thing down here. Those were painted on the front in order to cover up that wooden frame that I showed you on the back, because you're constantly having to deal with the fact that you're seeing through the thing. So whatever you put back there, framing devices or whatever, either you have to let them show or find some way of mitigating their effect in the design. And here are lots of different techniques. Like this part was painted with a brush, and those are the applications of the plastic strips to the surface. There's a lot of spray painting where I just tear paper and spray around it to get effects like that. Sometimes that white area there is brushwork. And then of course there's I drilled holes and put these studs into the surface as well. So anyway, there's a finished piece.